BBC4 Collections, specially chosen programmes from the BBC archive. For this collection, Max Hastings has selected interviews with Great War veterans filmed in the 1960s. More programmes on this theme and other BBC4 collections are available on BBC iPlayer.
Sad is not a soldier's word. Browned up, fed up, yes. Or he'll moan the clock round. But the only time a soldier is really and deeply sad is when his line of duty takes him among refugees. Those weary, shuffling hordes, stumbling down the road, chiefly women, children, the elderly, carrying, pushing, pulling, pram, wheelbarrow, farm cart, their world piled high and often perched on the top, Granny. On a brisk October morning, we arrived in the threatened port of Antwerp. The people lined the streets, they cheered, they waved, they gave us flowers and wine. The war was young and so were we. We felt gallant, they felt relieved. Out to the trenches we went, we settled, opened reserve ammunition, fixed our bayonets, and said, now let them come. Night came, but not the enemy. We posted sentries and settled, but not for long. Heavy rifle fire broke out on the left, then on the right. We manned the firing step and peered over. Searchlights from the fort swept the front. We could see nothing. We held our fire and felt neglected. Morning came, still no enemy. And suddenly high in the sky was a train-like rumble and whistle, followed by an explosion. Smoke and flame shot up in the city. An old hand said, them's howitzer shells, the bastards must be a dozen miles away. At intervals through the day, these rumbling shells rolled over, flames shot up after each explosion. Then the oil tanks by the dockside were alight. The smoke gathered over the port to join the autumn mists. And the glow from the fires, it looked like hell. We could only wait. We felt useless, helpless. Suddenly, an order came, prepare to move. Just at the back of our trench was a deserted farm. Odd men had scrounged over into the farm, and as we were about to move, an officer shouted to me, Sergeant, see the farm's clear. Coming back through an outhouse, I saw some pails of milk. And I did, a most unsoldierly action. I emptied my half-full water bottle and filled it full of milk. We soon got orders to move to the right and onto the road. And we thought, they won't come to us, we're going out to them. On reaching the road, instead of turning left to the enemy, we turned right to the city. And we had received the most deadening, soul-racking order a soldier can receive, retreat. We picked our way through the burning buildings, past the flaming oil tanks, to the floating bridge, pontoon bridge, the engineers had built for us to cross and then destroy. Each side of the bridge stood the hordes of refugees, every kind, children, women, nuns, priests. This was the Bridge of Sighs. They had been stopped so we could cross. The flare from the bearing domes lit their faces expressionless and hopeless. We were ashamed. An officer called to me, "Sergeant, shout break step." It should have been break hearts. We were soon across in the open country. The mob pressed on down the roads each side of us, the citizens of Antwerp. After a few miles, we arrived at a Belgian village, marched into the cobbled square, and the orders were, rest where you stand and be ready for any alarm. Just by was the church. Straw had been placed all round it. There were dark forms lying on it. My pal and I moved to the straw and were about to settle when we noticed two young women. With a mumbled apology, we were moving away when a good English voice in good English said, "Don't go, please." We squatted down, and I saw that one of the young women was nursing a whimpering baby. For something to say, I said, "Is your baby all right?" With a sad smile, she said, "It is not my baby. I don't even know its mother." She said, "We are tired and hungry." My pal and I emptied out of our sacks 2 tins of sardines and army biscuits. She sighed, said, "The baby needs milk." Milk! I swung my water bottle round. I think even the baby was surprised. Quite soon, we fell in and marched away. The British government had lost a water bottle, but the baby had found a meal. And cut. There was a jumping-off trench which was halfway across no man's land, and a brigade of us had to go out and line this trench, so we were halfway there. But waiting, we got assembled about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Then we had to wait till 0 hour, which was 5:45. And I remember those lads standing there, dead silent, couldn't make a noise. The fellow next to you, he was your best friend, you loved him. You perhaps didn't know him the day before. And then, an hour to go, they were the longest, those hours, and the shortest hours in life. An infantryman in the front line, he's got a cold, deep fear and experience in infantryman. Then 5 minutes to go, and then 0 hour, and all hell lets loose. There's our barrage, the Germans' barrage, and over the top we go. As soon as you get over the top, fear has left you, and it's terror. You don't look, you see. You don't hear, you listen. Your nose is filled with fumes and death. You taste the top of your mouth. You're weapon, and you are one. Hunted you back to the jungle. The veneer of civilization has dropped away. You see the line of men, the flare of the shells, there's the mist of dawn, November dawn, and the fumes from the shells. And every now there's a bursting shell which gives it a dirty orange colour. And you see this line, then a gap, you close in and go on. You come into the front line, the Germans' front line. What's that on the left? You can see figures rising from the ground. Somebody said they got their hands up. We'd kept well up to the barrage in my part of the line. So the Germans were down the dugout. The bombers tended to them, and we went on. We soon across the second line. And then we came to the third line, which was no dinner. It wasn't occupied by the Germans at all. So we rested there a bit. We had to rest for so long. I discovered my battalion was down to just under 300. And out of 20 officers, 1. Captain. Very good chap, but he'd never been in a battle before. This was his first experience. I was the sergeant major of the line. I knew what had to be done. But could I tell him to do it, and could I do it if I told him? It wasn't for me to do it. And I felt very lonely. I looked over my shoulder and my colonel was coming from alone. The colonel always stays back until he gets orders, but he'd broken his orders and come forward. Freiberg. He said, "Hello, Tobin, how are you?" I said, "Oh, all right, sir." He said, "We got a VC today." I said, "Yeah, mine as well." He got his, and then he gathered all the oddments up, and away we went to take the next objective. The final objective was the village, Bokar. We hadn't sufficient men to take that. So we dug in, waited till some reinforcements came up. The colonel sent me out on battle patrol. Battle patrol is just 20 or 30 men, and you go ahead of your trench. You're really there to hold up the counterattack as long as you can. That's the posh way of putting it. But you are there to do as much damage as you can to warn the front line so they're getting ready. However, there was no counterattack that night, so we came back from our battle patrol all right. One of our men went out and came back in great glee. He'd been at the back of the village somehow or another. He was a Glasgow Irishman, a real lad. And he'd seen a wagon going along as the Germans bringing the rations up. So he climbed over the back, bayoneted the driver, and pinched the mail. So he brought it back to the line, and we had schnapps. And in the mail bag was a box of cigars coming up for the German commander. Freiberg sent it back to our general. Passchendaele was the infantryman's graveyard. We called it the slaughterhouse. And even the most seasoned veteran felt he'd be lucky if he got there and came back. There was no chance of getting wounded and getting a blighty one at Passchendaele. You'd either get through or die. Because if you're wounded and you slip off the duckboards, you just sank into the mud. I don't know how far the duckboards extended because it was such slow going up to the front. Must have been hundreds and hundreds of yards and they zigzagged about. But each side was a sea of mud. You stumbled and slid along. If you slipped, you went up to the waist, possibly. Not only that, but deep in every pool, you'd fall in with decomposed bodies of humans and mules, or mules and perhaps both. And if you were wounded and slipped off, well, then that was the end of you. And when you got up there was no front line. There was no line at all. It was just a series of posts scraped in the mud. Here a machine gun's crew, there a few riflemen, further on the Lewis gun's crew. And in some cases, the battle depth of your battalion was 1,000 yards. These posts bobbed about. You couldn't get to any of them in daylight, because you're under enemy observation the whole time. You couldn't get food, nor rations, nor ammunition or anything up in the daylight, because these duckboards were taped by the German. You were shelling them the whole time. And in most places, if shells start dropping, you run to the right or run to the left and get some cover. But you're on the duckboard, you couldn't run. There was mud to your right and mud to your left, and you had to face it and go on. The men and relief was hopeless. The battalion came from an ordinary trench as a battalion, but the men struggled back in twos and threes, and some a day late. They hadn't been found, they hadn't been told, they'd been relieved. Possibly they didn't know they were there. I've seen men coming out covered in mud. They just scraped the mud from their eyes. They had in their hands what looked like a muddy bough of a tree. It was their Lewis gun. The only thought in it was that the Germans were in as bad a position as we were. In fact, we had a case where one little party of men was trying to make their hole more comfortable, scooping it out, and some hundreds of yards away the Germans were doing the same, but both in their misery didn't take any damn notice of each other. And we used to get browned up, fed up as we called it now, war. But if ever we heard we were going back to Passchendaele a second time, that was always the horror of an infantryman. You know, we wanted to go to that sector again. Of course, you couldn't use the guns up there, you see. I've seen them make a road to try and get some guns up there, 18-pounder shells. Beautiful new shells, and they were throwing in the mud, trying to get a base to get a gun up. We didn't have any gas there, now staying in the line, but everything else. Mules, you couldn't get any rations up with the mules. They tried it, and mules either got the wind up and jumped in the mud, and that was the end of the mule and your rations, you see. Really, a man, we used to try and regiment up for 48 hours. They couldn't keep men up there any longer. And one time we went up, conditions were so bad, they gave the men a double touch of rum, which was out of exception, and every NCO from a Hans Corporal upwards carried a bottle of rum in his hip to have troops on the way. I thought the battalion commanders had the greatest worry at Passchendaele because it was one of the fronts where their flanks were in the air. The battalion commander, our battalion commander, had to wander miles to try and get in touch with the Canadians on the right. And of course, the horror of that sort of caper was there were pillboxes scattered about, which the Germans had made. And these had to be approached very carefully because you didn't quite know whether we were in the pillbox or the Germans were in the pillbox. And very often you'd go and they were full of dead, both Germans and us, wounded that had crawled in and died. It's the horrors of Passchendaele. And cut. My battalion had withdrawn around the wood. And now for days, it was an infantryman's battle. Even our divisional artillery joined us as infantry, often firing alongside of us over open sights. Our Major General and his brigadiers were with us, controlling the troops like Wellington-like. It was leapfrog in reverse. Battalion went through battalion, company through company. But always a company, always a battalion, standing, facing the enemy, ready to fight. And so we came back to the Somme battlefields. Our general formed us in the square, his flanks in the air, he put out flanking battalions. In some 6 hours, we came back over these old battlefields that had taken 2 years. On the 26th of March, we dropped into a trench. It was a trench we knew of old. We had started retreating the 21st of March, 1918. We were back in the trench that we had attacked from on the 13th of November, 1916. In that trench came up Field Marshal Haig's famous message, "Backs to the wall. Every man will stand and fight and fall, no more retreating." But still we had a little joy in our hearts, the infantrymen, because although we had not won, we had not been beaten. The only lead in our hearts was the thought that we were back to the old trench ding-dong. No signs of an end. And so the weeks and months went on. April, May. We even did 1 or 2 small attacks. The German attacks grew fewer and weaker. When we were out of the line, we used to stand by the road and watch the fresh, strong, plump, new American battalions swing by. They waved and laughed and shouted. Our boys stood by the side of the road and grinned back. But we wondered, did they know? Could they do it? Would they do it? We were pleased to see them. And then it must have been July or August, I saw the first sunshine. We were in a rest, a bivouac camp. A rough notice board had been put up. I heard some giggling, some twittering, some laughing. It was like a horde of sparrows. I looked across. There were dozens of infantrymen crowded round the board. They were laughing and giggling and passing and chatting back to each other. Those that could read the notice were passing it on, what was on the board. It was almost like a Gilbert and Sullivan's comedy production. The notice read, and in the South, the French and the Americans had driven back the enemy, goodness knows how many miles, God knows how many prisoners and guns had been captured. We were happy. It was the first sunshine since 1914. And in our war-weary hearts, we knew it was not the end, but we knew it was the beginning of the end.
And cut.